This is the HK45 Tactical. It is the successor to H&K's USP. Now, I've been searching for over a year for what I consider my perfect pistol. And I have some pretty particular or specific criteria. Number one, I was looking for a pistol chambered in 45 ACP. I like 45 ACP. Now, I don't want to get into a bunch of discussions about which one's better, 9mm Luger, 45 ACP. What I will say is they both can be very effective, but they're effective in different ways. The 9mm Luger is a supersonic round that hits like a bolt of lightning. That's where it gets its effectiveness from. 45 ACP is a subsonic round. It's a heavy bullet, and it hits like a ton of bricks. And that's where it gets its effectiveness from. Both very effective rounds if you're using a good bullet, and of course you do your job of putting the bullet in the right place. Now, one of the things I was also looking for was a pistol with a slightly larger magazine capacity relative to what's offered in the 1911. Now, I've got several 1911s, and I really like 1911s. It's really, really hard to beat that wonderful trigger on a 1911. But the 1911, for the most part, you're looking at maximum 8-round magazines. So what I was looking for was something a little bit more magazine capacity. And what H&K has done is they've offered this HK45T with a 10-round or 10+1 magazine capacity. I also wanted to make sure that this pistol had both single action and double action capabilities. Double action capabilities can be very important, but I actually really prefer firing single action or single action only. I wanted a pistol also with a manual safety and decocker. I really like that feature, and we are now going to exercise the decocker, and I really like that. My perfect pistol also has a threaded barrel. This is a 16-1 left-handed thread, fairly common, especially on HKs. Now that gives me the capability to, if I wanted to, put a suppressor on this or a silencer on it, or a comp, which is what I'm thinking about putting on it, a mini comp. At least want to try that out. With a threaded barrel, and if you're maybe in the future going to be putting on a silencer, then what you want to have are these elevator or suppressor height sights. And of course you can see at a glance that the 45 Tactical does indeed have these elevated sights. Another feature I was looking for is night sights. And this is what makes this my, let's say, near perfect pistol. Notice I've got a tritium night sight in front, but nothing in the back. Another specific criteria I was really looking for is the rail, a Picatinny rail in particular. Now, the USP had a rail, but it was an HK proprietary rail system. This is a standard Picatinny rail, and I'm going to make use of this thing. As a lot of you know who've maybe been watching our videos for a while, I really like to use the Mantis X10. It's a great training device. This, of course, could also be used for a laser or a flashlight attachment, both of which are very, very easy to get with a Picatinny rail attachment. And what we have now is a bunch of characteristics, a list that's pretty easy to check off, by going to a manufacturer's website and looking at the specifications. But what you can never get from a website is a really good feel for the true ergonomics of a particular pistol or rifle or shotgun for that matter. So I spent numerous trips to the different gun shops feeling and testing out the 45T. And one of the things I look for is its balance. If I point this gun, I should not feel that it's heavy someplace, and certainly I don't want to feel heavy on the muzzle end. You know, a lot of times when a company puts a rail onto a pistol or onto a gun, they do it as a second thought or an afterthought almost. Or they have a gun that's already been designed, maybe it's been quite successful, and then they decide to add a rail to it as a A2 modification or an A3 or something like that. And oftentimes that addition really messes up the balance of those guns. This pistol was designed with the rail in place, and so we don't get that kind of poor balance. Another thing I really have to feel comfortable with is the overall grip. I like this relatively high grip, by the way. The grip angle is exactly the same as a 1911, which is probably why I gravitated towards this gun and felt that it was well balanced for me. H&K also makes different inserts, so if you have larger or smaller hands, you can change out this back strap of this grip. It has a very firm grip, kind of some finger slots or spots right here, making it a little bit more comfortable still. I also like the fact that this trigger guard is large, and if I'm wearing gloves, which is kind of par for the course in the fall and winter, I can still easily fit my hand inside the trigger guard even with gloves on it, although I am going to lose some dexterity and feel when I'm wearing gloves, obviously. Now the trigger is a huge one, and you really got to feel this to know if you like it or not. It's set at a 4.5 pound single action trigger, which is awful similar to my 1911s. It's not as crisp, I'll say, as my 1911s, and that could be because I've really gotten used to those 1911s over the years and still need to get used to this one. I don't think I even have 100 rounds through this thing yet. But the way the trigger feels is, you know, at first it gives pretty darn easily, and then you hit almost a little wall, a little block. You can really feel it tightening up, and that's that last little bit right there that is that, you know, the end of the 4.5 pounds, maybe even about 3.5 of those 4.5 pounds. And then on ergonomics, I have to think about dropping the mag. And I am very accustomed to my 1911 having the mag release about here, right? And so I can simply touch it with my thumb and I drop the mag. Now this one, if I'm shooting this and it runs dry, right, I cannot reach little mag release right here. The only way I can do that is by rotating the gun in my hand and then dropping it. However, that's not how this gun was really designed to be used. This gun was designed to be used to drop the mag with the trigger finger. And I've started practicing with this. I like it just fine. I have no problems with that. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. But boy, it is actually a pretty nice design once you give it a chance. Speaking about mag releases and mag capacity, H&K makes a accoutrement or an aftermarket magazine for the HK45, and it is a 13 round mag. Really not terribly much larger than your 10, but now we go 13 plus 1, and we're in business. Doesn't look bad. Feels just fine. Let's go ahead and roll some footage where we were shooting this 13 round mag and see how it performs. But stay tuned, because right after our range footage, we're going to come back in and disassemble and then reassemble this 45 Tactical. Back to the chest. Not bad. Not a fault, not a flaw. No runs, drips, or errors. HK45T, flawless performance today. I like this pistol. It's my near perfect pistol. After shooting this quite a bit, it's time to clean it up. So, like normal good practice, we want to ensure that this gun is indeed empty. And it is. And then the next step, of course, is to tear this down. So it's not too terribly difficult, and it is a toolless takedown design, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. I guess that's probably the case with disassembly and reassembly of any new pistol. So what the key is this little notch right here, and the fact that it needs to be lined up right over the top of this here. Now on the back side of this is a button that we're going to push, which will allow this axle, if you want to call it that, to release and allow us to pull this out, thereby allowing us to fully disassemble this. There we go. Now what I just did is I used this finger to hold the slide back in that position, and I used another finger and the fingernail to push the button out from right there. And then this hand, of course, just lifts it right out. And now it just slides apart. So that's about the hard part. Now this pistol has what HK calls a recoil management system. And I first thought that might be just some marketing. But in reality, I think it is more than that, because there is less perceived recoil on this 45 ACP relative to shooting the exact same load in the 1911. And in fact, my Springfield Armory loaded 1911 actually weighs more than this HK, and yet it does have more perceived recoil. And I think what's happening, what they're doing, is they're using this right here. It's kind of an interesting design. I don't know how well you can see it. So we'll take a look at this recoil management system once I get the barrel removed and all these other things. Next step is to remove this recoil management system and the spring. And that's pretty easy. Just a little bit of a push on the end here, to compress it just a little bit, and that then releases this piece from the barrel itself. Now, HK calls this a modified Browning design, so effectively a modified 1911 design. By the way, to remove this barrel, because it is threaded barrel that has the thread protector on it normally, we have to remove the thread protector and then push it forward just a little bit, just enough so you can rotate it out, as you can see right there. And that really is as far as it goes. I'm going to go ahead and clean these pieces and then do the reassembly, and we'll take a look at that recoil management system. So it's nice and clean now and time to reassemble. But before we reassemble, I did want to take a little bit of time and talk about that recoil management system that H&K is using here. And what is happening is effectively these two pieces are riding about like this. Now this is the barrel, this is the spring and the recoil management system here. And I think what's happening, this piece, as it locks in here, is effectively reducing or retarding the blowback, so that while the recoil really is still the same, the perceived recoil is different. This piece right here sits on that axle, and I think that's another part of that recoil management system that's affecting the modified Browning design, or that retarded blowback. So let's go ahead now and reassemble this whole thing. It's just effectively the opposite of what we did a moment ago to disassemble it. Now this piece goes in place. It's sitting here, and what I like to do is just give it a little nudge, about like that. And if you've done it right, it will lock in place under the little bit of pressure from this spring. If you don't do it right, it'll pop back out. Put the thread protector back in place. These are 16-1 left-hand threads. Take some getting used to, without a doubt. Flip it over. And now once again, just line up that notch right there with this opening here, and this piece goes right in there. Quite a bit easier than disassembly. And that is that.